My name's Jeff White, and I'm alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 17, 1986. I used to go to the big book when there wasn't many meetings in Raleigh. And they used to say if you ever got a sobriety date, if you got up here, you needed to give it. Took me a long time to get one. My home group is the Nightdale group of Alcoholics Anonymous now. On Monday nights, we have a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that we study the big book, unless there's someone new that never been to the first meeting, and then we have a first step meeting. On Friday nights, we have an open meeting. A lot of Al-Anon people come to our meeting. Been thinking about starting a meeting called Al-Anon, where us drunks can learn how to live with them Al-Anon. My wife's not really up on that, but. And then on the last Friday of the month, we have a speaker meeting. I'm supposed to tell in a general way what it used to be like, what happened, what it's like now. And the only place I know to start is at the beginning. And I was born in 1952 to two alcoholic parents. And I used to describe my childhood like this: if you ain't never been to the Friday night butcher knife fights, don't go. I prayed and prayed for Mom and Daddy to quit fighting. Now, my grandparents, at the age of about 5, we started spending a lot of time at my grandparents' house, my sister and myself. I have one sister. She's 2.5 years older than me, and she's never had a problem with anything. She's been responsible all of her life. And my grandparents, my grandmother was a devout congregational Christian. And when the church doors opened, we went. And if you weren't 16 years old, which in those days I thought I was grown at 16, you didn't have a choice. You went to church. And I sort of give up on God because Mom and Daddy kept fighting. At the age of 10, Gertrude, that finally got sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and my father, they went to prison. And we were awarded custody to my grandparents. Well, all my life, I was born in a small community of 100 folks maybe. And everybody knew what was going on at everybody's house. And I was ashamed. When I was 2 years in second grade, my mother was the president of the PTA. She tried to be a good mother. She just had to drink. And at the PTA meeting, Gertrude comes to the PTA meeting drunk. Didn't want to be, I'm sure. And fell in the flower beds, and everybody that knew me saw it. And I was ashamed. I became the life of the party, hiding my feelings, feeling less than everybody, hiding that too. And that's the way it went. I never was going to drink because look what it had done to my family. That's what I said in 8th grade. At 15.5 years old, after a baseball game, this boy, my sister was beautiful. She's still a beautiful lady. And by the time I was 15 years old, I had learned to use everything in this world to my advantage. and nobody meant anything to me but my wants. I didn't know that then, but I know that today. And we won that ball game. Myself and a couple other guys were instrumental in it. A fellow named Butch that was in love with my sister had some beer. He asked them other two boys did they want one, and they wanted one. And he asked me did I want one, and I said, yeah, I'll have one too. And there's a little Colt 45 malt liquors with the horseshoes on the side. Never forget it. Carried to the spot today in Sanford that I drank those beers. And when I drank those two beers, it fixed everything that was wrong with me. I wasn't ashamed anymore. I was as good as, better than most, I thought. See? And every opportunity, Lee County was a dry county. And every opportunity after that I got a chance to drink, I drank. Everybody knew the bootleggers. There was a little place over in the edge of Chatham County called Victor's. And I can remember leaving basketball game, running 140 miles an hour to get to Victor's before he closed. Now, they didn't care how old you were. If you come to Victor's, they'd sell you beer. Now, Victor's was the kind of place that when you got there, if you didn't have a gun, they'd give you one. You was probably going to need it. It was a rough joint. Well, I know today, looking back, that I've had a guardian angel all my life. I'd have never made it without God looking over me and my sister. And so that's the way it went until I graduated from high school. I never wanted to be but two things. One was a baseball player. Freddie will appreciate this. The other one was a game warden. Well, I moved out of a little community called Colon, North Carolina, which is about 7 miles west of Sanford. And I came to Raleigh from a dry county. They had 2 or 3 women's colleges. So I was like Robert H. I'd been liking little girls ever since I found out they weren't little boys. And they had nightclubs, and you could buy beer and dance and all of that, and man, I had arrived. Well, I started going to NC State, but I had such a resentment against Gertrude that I'd show them I wouldn't go to class. I made a C in English. That was the only class I went to. The rest of the time I spent in the student union shooting pool on Gertrude's money. And I'd drink, and I'd come in, pass out, and I'd get up, and I'd go over and sit off of Hillsborough Street under one of them big water oaks till I felt like I was going to live. Then I'd go to student union, shoot pool, and then I'd come home of evening and tell them how good I was doing at NC State University. Well, I was such a country bumpkin that I thought to give you a report card to carry home, get your parents to sign it, you know. I didn't know nothing about the world. All I knew about was the tobacco fields, the woods, and the fishing holes. That's all I knew about. Well, they send your grade reports home in the mail. And I come home one day, and the truth was out. And they said, well, Jeff, if you aren't going to go to school, you can go to work. Well, Gertrude had gotten married to a fellow alcoholic at the Big Book Group, and his name was Vernon Brown. And he went making a plumber out of me. When I was getting drunk every night, working some, I just wouldn't show up. I was so resentful at the world that I didn't owe anybody an explanation for anything. And I didn't call in to work if I wasn't coming. What I did was I worked for a cheaper rate, and that way they wouldn't fire me. They would let me work because I was making money for them when I was there. Even done a little plumbing work with a fellow named Robert H. Well, Gertrude and Vernon, they were doing 12-step work. They didn't have treatment centers all over the world in those days. They were doing 12-step work and going to meetings. 19 years old, I come in one night, I'd been drinking George Dickel. Never forget it. Walked in the bedroom, set the jar up on my glass mixed drink up on the dresser drawers there, passed out. Well, when I woke up, Gertrude was like an aardvark smelling that glass. And they told me this, at 19 years old, we can't put up with your lifestyle, and you got to go. Now, how could they do that to me after the childhood I'd had? And they put me out on the street. Vernon gave me $5, and Gertrude packed my suitcase. I used to call that a suitcase, but I know today it's a suitcase. And they kicked me out of the house. I'd like to tell y'all that I had to live in the woods and this and that and the other, but by the time I was 19 years old, I was an accomplished thief, liar, manipulator, cheat. And I knew what people wanted to hear, and that's what I told them. Truth didn't mean nothing to me. Nothing mean nothing to me but my wants. Well, that's the way it went. At 23 years old, 22 years old, I got a letter from a guy named Wes Livengood. He was the head scout for the Philadelphia Phillies. And I'd been drunk since I was 15 and a half years old. But I was a pretty good ball player. How good, I don't know, because I didn't have any self-confidence. Still feeling less than. And so I went to Florida to play baseball. I was going to straighten up. First time in my life that I was going to straighten up. I'd get out there and I'd run around the block till we went to the field. Them coaches sitting over there looking out a window. And I was showing them coaches what they wanted to see. And that lasted about 2 weeks, maybe. Florida's a hard place to stay sober. And I started breaking curfew. Curfew was at 11 o'clock. They come check on you. I'd be laying under the covers, fully dressed, waiting for that coach to leave. And when he left, I was right out behind him. At 7:30 the next morning, practice started. If they caught you breaking curfew, you run wind sprints all day long. I've run a lot of wind sprints. Well, when I left to go to Florida, I left a woman in Wake County, North Carolina, there pregnant. Her and I got a hold of a bottle of Leafer's Milch wine one night. And we drank that wine, and she turned up pregnant. Well, I stayed in Florida for 6-7 weeks, drunk all the time, making progress. And then I got hurt. And I come back to Raleigh on crutches. Had messed up a tendon. In those days, you messed up a tendon, your career was over. Today they fix it. And on April the 5th, 1975, we got married. Had a church wedding. Her daddy wouldn't come. Can't blame him much. And April the 25th, my daughter was born. They had to get me off the golf course drunk, so I'd be at the hospital when my daughter was born. And I was going to straighten up again. Didn't last long. See, Gertrude had this beauty shop up there at 5 Points. And I stole so many $20 bills out of the cash register that they finally took the cash register out of the beauty shop and told them put the money in their pocket. And see, I'd steal $20. In those days, you could pay the big shot all night long with $20. Beers was 50 cents a piece. Schlitz beers. But I was stealing a lot of money, so I was drinking Heinekens. That way everybody'd know I was a big shot. And I come home one night, drunk as usual, stayed drunk. And she was on the phone to her boyfriend. I was also psychic in those days. And I knew she was talking to her boyfriend. I had four or five girlfriends. I mean, yeah. Why shouldn't she have a boyfriend? And so I grabbed her. I didn't hit her, but I grabbed her and her lip got busted. And she scooped up that 6-month-old child, and she left. And I went out there and laid in the front yard hoping Mama or somebody would feel sorry for me. Nobody did. I got up and I went on back up to the Sportsman's Tavern at 5 Points, and I never looked back. Well, drinking's getting worse. One night Gertrude says, next thing's going to happen to you, you're going to get a DUI. That's driving under the influence for y'all younger folks. They didn't know much about dry goods in the early 70s. And so one night I had been over to a place drinking depth charges, I think is what they call them, where you take a drink of liquor and chase it with beer. And I come out of a juke joint. By now I won't go into no places where there was bands playing and a lot of people and stuff. I was going to honky-tonks, juke joints, places like Victor's. That's where I felt comfortable. And so I saw a car coming down number 1 highway. I pulled on out in the road, and the state patrolman like to hit me in the back. Depth perception must have been messed up. And I had just about talked myself out of that DUI when a Raleigh City cop come up and he says, hey, he'll blow 14, carry him downtown. Well, that cop knew his business, carried me downtown, and I blew 14. Well, a buddy of mine, a friend of my mother's, he was a lawyer, and he went my bail and said it'd look real good to the judge if I would go to treatment. Well, they had just opened up ATC over on Falstaff Road behind Wake Memorial Hospital. And so I went to ATC. And people would come and carry us out to meetings, usually the big book. I'd been going to meetings since I was 15 years old when I moved to Raleigh. Gertrude had gotten out of women's prison and she wanted to renew our relationship. And so I went over to the big book group from the treatment center. I knew at least 50% of the people in the room. And those folks really wanted to help me. Maybe for Gertrude's reason, maybe just to help a drunk. But I needed to drink for a lot longer than that. I picked up a white chip for Gertrude and the judge. And I tried my best not to drink. And I'd go periods of time and I wouldn't drink. And then something terrible would happen, as usual. And I'd fly back to Alcoholics Anonymous and get another white chip for Gertrude. I had just about become unemployable. It wasn't that I couldn't work, it's that I wouldn't work. And I started doing another substance that causes paranoid schizophrenia if you do it right. And my heart would beat for a while, and then it wouldn't beat for a while. And I'd wonder, is it going to start back this time? And as soon as it'd start back, I'd do some more. And then they brought Coors to North Carolina. And I always swore that if they brought Coors to North Carolina, I was going to drink some. Just another excuse. Now, here's the way that went. I would go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. They met on Tuesdays and Thursday nights at the Big Book Group. And I'd get there at 5 minutes to 8, and I was gone at 5 minutes after 8. And what I'd do is I'd go to one of them juke joints, and I'd drink Coca-Colas and shoot pool. And that's the way it went. And in 1982, my mama was working with a lot of folks. She sponsored a lot of folks. And had this girl over there to her house. And I had a couple of bird dog puppies over there. And I went over there to feed them bird dog puppies. And that girl come rushing out the house. And I had to have her. She thought I was a big shot. I was doing illegal things. People was hauling me money left and right, and I was spending it fast as they could bring it on that paranoid schizophrenia dust. And I was really trying to stay straight for Mama, even though I hated her. I didn't know that at the time. And we went to Winston-Salem to a convention up there. And we rode back with a fellow named Dave C. That was Gertrude's sponsor. Ann Vernon's. And we were riding back. That lady that run into Mom and I, we decided we was going to get married. We told Dave we get married. Dave didn't say a word. He just kept driving. Well, we got married. There she sits. And when I got married to Debbie, everybody at the Big Book started taking bets how long my marriage was going to last. Well, I just wasn't whooped yet. I thought I was sorry as a dog instead of sick. I thought it was a character issue. And I thought I was beyond forgiveness because I was a sorry excuse of a human being, period. And so anyway, you know, when you're trying to stay sober for your wife and your mama and all that, you got to do a lot of sneaking around drinking. And I went to the store one night in my house coat. And I decided wouldn't nobody know, so I drank a couple of beers. Hadn't had nothing to drink about 90 days. Well, if you ain't had nothing to drink 90 days, it'll slur your voice. And I had never been one to dance to the chin music. And the only option I had was not go home. And that's the way it got for me. I'd go home every 2 or 3 days when I just couldn't stand it no more. When I was just about dead, then I'd go home. I always waited till she went to school. I wasn't no fool. And I'd go to bed, and I ain't never doing this again, and get 2 or 3 hours sleep, and I was gone again, 2 or 3 days at a time. Well, I come home that night, she was gone again, back to her mama's house. And her mama was telling her, don't go back to that sorry fella. Could use some other words. And so I did what I always did when I was in a bind, when my butt was on fire. I went back to Alcoholics Anonymous and I picked up a white chip to get my wife to come back home. And I walked in that meeting, there was an old fellow named Walt P. there. He'd been watching me for 6.5 years. He said, Jeff, says, you need to get honest with yourself about your drinking. And I've been as smart as I am. I'm the fellow they talk about in the big book of above average intelligence. I asked him a question, how do you do that? I had no idea he'd have an answer. He said, look at your track record. Well, that didn't mean nothing to me. I was a lot smarter than Walt was. Didn't mean nothing to me. Another old fellow over there named Gene, he says, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. I thought that was pretty nice, kind of guy I'd ask to be my sponsor, you know. And so that meeting was over. Another fellow over there said, Jeff, says if you don't want to drink when you get up in the morning, you ask the power greater than yourself to help you not drink that day. And he was a mind reader too. He read my mind. He said, Jeff, do it whether you believe it or not, what you got to lose. Well, I stopped that night. A fellow named Sweet William Watson offered me a ride home. I wouldn't take it because I knew William wasn't going to stop and get me a six-pack. And the only reason I was at that meeting was to get my wife to come home, not to quit drinking. And I went home that night with that six-pack, walked all the way home, 5 or 6 miles, nothing to a bird hunter. And I got that six-pack. And I was sitting there drinking that six-pack, but it wasn't doing nothing. And what I was really doing was looking at my track record. For the time I was 15 and a half years old till I'm 34 now, sitting there on that step, same place the SBI handcuffed me last time. Looking at my track record, and I was seeing what I was getting. Now, I had done been through one marriage. I had done thrown away a college education. I had thrown away a baseball career. Fixing to throw away another marriage. And it dawned on me that them folks over at the Big Book group was right. I was an alcoholic. And I'd found out in that treatment center that I had a disease. And I didn't believe that. I thought it was a character issue. At Turner's Chapel Congregational Christian Church, they'd have thought it was a kind of character issue too. And I never finished that six-pack. I drank 4 of them. I remember opening the 5th one. I don't know if I drank it or not, but I remember throwing the 6th one out there in that pile line. In the very instant that I got honest with myself about my drinking, a power greater than myself that I choose to call God, because Grandma called him that, He took the desire to drink out of me. And he gave me something that's indispensable. He gave me willingness. And I'd had many sponsors, especially when somebody was looking that was holding the purse strings. But I went back to meetings, and I got me a sponsor. First person I ever trusted in my life. I'm 34 years old, and I hadn't never trusted nobody. Because the way I was raised, I couldn't trust nobody. It was all about survival. And I say, Cass, how many of these meetings I need to go to a week? He said, Jeff, how many days a week you drink? Well, he knew I drank every day. He knew me better than I knew myself. And so I started going to meetings every day for a year. And after a year, he told me I could cut down to 5 a week. By then, I was enjoying going to meetings. And I had gotten up with a few friends, and we were having a good time. See, I thought that when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought all the fun was over. How wrong I was. The fun hadn't even started. And I met some folks, and they introduced me to sports fishing and golf and turkey hunting. And what a life. And we got to that step 3, and I asked God, Cass, how about this God business? Now listen, I had been to church. I had a 13-year pen from Congregational Christian Church. Hadn't missed a Sunday in 13 years. Didn't know nothing about God. My sister sat right beside me. She was full of love, and I was full of hate. I hated everything, everybody. He said, Jeff, all you need to know about God is you ain't him. And that's where it started. Well, he tricked me into working that 4th step. He appealed to my ego. Jeff, would you like to go to Blackstone? Everybody in Blackstone's got 20 years sobriety. If you anybody in AA, that's where you go. That's where I need to be, Cat. He says, and by the way, I done told him a lie. You started that 4th step yet? Oh, yeah. He says, well, good. When we get up there to Blackstone, I want to see what you got so far. Well, I went home that night, and I wrote down every dirty, rotten, sorry thing I'd ever done as far back as I could remember. Cass had shared some stuff with me you wouldn't put in the newspaper. That's the reason I knew I could trust him. And when we started out of Blackstone, Virginia, we pulled over beside that lake there to the right, and we started going through that 4th step. Now, I had all the deadly sins, but a few of them were glaring. Instincts gone astray. Natural instincts gone astray. Well, I still got a lot of natural instincts, but ain't none of them glaring today. You see, because I quit living the way I was living. I quit doing folks the way I was doing. I went into business for myself about 2 years later. Robert H. says, Jeff, if you incorporate these 12 steps and these 12 traditions in your business, you can't help but be a success. 25 years later, I closed that business. Took me a long time to figure out how to quit working for money. I quit working for money, and I went to working for my employees because they had to live too. Now, my relationship with God in my life has been of the educational variety. I won't stuck sober and stuck straight right off the bat. And I've lived and learned. And today I'd rather understand than to be understood. Mama used to talk about walking a mile in somebody else's moccasins, understanding them. I ain't near as smart as I used to be. Fella in AA talked about being double dumb. It's a good place to be. And then that daughter that my first wife scooped up at 6 months old and left, she thinks I hung the moon today. She gave me, 22 years ago, she gave me a granddaughter. 3 years later, she gave me a grandson. And some of the most rewarding days of my sobriety have been when I started teaching little folks baseball. Started coaching baseball. Did that for 4 or 5 years until I got to where they got to throwing so hard I couldn't see the ball coming. Today I sponsor folks. A couple of them have got long-term sobriety. I tell a man with 30 years, you don't need much sponsoring. If you've been 30 years without a drink, you know how to live by now. And then I got a couple of folks that are just starting out. One fellow told me the other day, he says, I'm ready to do my 4th step. I said, the hardest thing about that is getting a pencil and a piece of paper. That's what old Hoss H said. And start with the worst thing first, and the rest of it will just fly out of you. He told me the other day he had the worst 3 things he'd ever done wrote down. I'm going to trick him one of these days and say, let's see them. But I don't push nobody through the steps, through the big book, anything. This is a self-help program. If you want it, come get it. And anybody can get it. I got it. It was a gift. I didn't do nothing to earn it. And that God fella, I see him doing and alive and working in the world every day now. And every morning when I get up, I ask him to do a couple of things, not for me. The only thing I want him to do for me is help me stay sober today. And asked him to guide and protect my family, friends, and loved ones. I used to name them all out. But it took so long, I just come up with that, and that covers everybody. Today, my wife and myself, we live a wonderful life. If I'd have got what I deserved, I'd be in central prison today, and you can count on that. I was given mercy. Mercy. I still go to my home group. Last night I went to an intergroup meeting. Listen, I've been to intergroup chair and everything, but my home group needed an intergroup thing, so I'm still involved. I try to do what I can. And I got that home group, and I go by the same rule. When the doors open, if I'm in town, I'm supposed to be there. Period. That way I ain't got to think of a lie why I can't go tonight. See? I want to thank the folks that prepared this wonderful meal for us. I want to thank Paige for asking me to speak tonight. I love y'all.